Love them or hate them, PressFit bottom brackets are a very common part of bike frames these days. So knowing how to replace one yourself can save you a lot of time and money. Here's how. So there are literally hundreds of different styles of bottom bracket for the modern bicycle, which is hugely frustrating for mechanics because, yeah, it's just baffling why our industry wants to come up with so many different ways to achieve essentially the same job, which in this case is to allow your cranks to spin freely. In this video, we're going to be specifically looking at PressFit bottom bracket systems. So one like this. The term PressFit should be a good clue as to how these systems are installed into the bike. They literally are pushed into the frame under an engineering tolerance, and that's how they hold themselves in place. And that's one of the things that they get criticised for, actually, as being the potential source of some of those nasty creaks and noises that we get from our bottom bracket areas sometimes in use. Well, we'll cover off some ways maybe to combat that as we go through the steps in this video. But the first step though, step one, is going to be to remove your cranks. So let's take a look at that. The cranks are removed from this bike. It's fairly straightforward. I don't need to go through the process with that. But one tip would be, as you do remove your cranks, it's a good idea to lie out all the various spaces, bottom bracket spaces and axle spaces, in the order they come off, and lie them out neatly in the correct order on the workbench, so that when it comes to refitting, you've got everything in the right order and you won't get that wrong. Right, so the next step is going to be to remove the old bottom bracket, and a big clue as to how PressFit bottom brackets come out is that, the hammer. Yes, everyone likes a hammer. So I'm not going to be able to cover every single type of standard and method for removal, but I'm going to cover some of the most common for PressFit systems. So as I said, the PressFit part of the name gives you a clue as to how they're installed into the frame. So we're basically going to have to just tap out the bottom bracket. In order to do that, we need to use a specific tool. So let me just put my hammer down for 1 second and run through a couple of tool specifics. These are common bottom bracket bearing removal tools. In this case, this is for 24mm axles, so we don't need that one because we've got a 30mm axle on this bike. So let me just pop that one down there. So we could use a tool like this, for instance, and that slides through the bottom bracket bearing, and as you can see, this splayed end is sprung loaded. So as we were to push that into the bearing, basically carefully insert that, and when it goes behind the cup, you'll hear it click into place. And then that would enable me to hit on the back side of that and drift the bottom bracket out of the shell. Better though for this system is another tool. So this tool, this is a Park Tools one, and this is designed to do a similar job, only it pops through from this side, and you can see that comes up against the face of the bearing behind, and that's got a nice locator cup in it as well. And at this stage, we literally grab our hammer. So with a few sharp blows of the hammer, you should find the bottom bracket cup starts to drift out of the frame, and you'll be able to see it move. Be careful when you get to, when it starts to move, not to whack it and fire it across the workshop or wherever you're working. Good idea just to keep your hand there and just tap the last bit gently, and then out will come your bottom bracket cup. Right, so you see me tap that cup out of the frame. That came out relatively easily, but just something to warn you about is that quite often these cups require quite a lot of force, so you're going to have to whack the bearing with quite a lot of force with the hammer, and that really honestly is going to render them useless. It's not good for bearings to be hit with force in that way, and also some of them, the way the tools mount, you would damage the cups even as well. So yeah, just bear that in mind. These are, once you whack them out of the frame in that way, they're not really designed to be reused. Another thing to consider is if you see that your bottom bracket, although it's a PressFit system, has a kind of notched end in it like so, that is another indication that you just need to be careful about something. And that is that some systems now use, although they're a PressFit system like this one from Token, they are actually two threaded halves. Do you remember I spoke at the beginning about the PressFit bottom brackets being criticised for creating lots of creaks and nasty noises? Well, this is one way that manufacturers have tried to combat that. So the bearing system press fits into the frame in the same way, but as you can see, it's a threaded central tube so that once they're pressed into the frame, you get that extra tightening of being able to tighten the two halves together. And for that, you would use a tool similar to this, which goes in like so, which allows you to tighten the bottom bracket into the frame. So yes, just a warning, if you see that kind of notched end to your bottom bracket, that's a sign that you're probably gonna need to use a tool to actually unwind it rather than whacking it out in the way that I just showed you with the other tool. Okay, so with your bottom bracket removed, now the next step is to give it a good cleanup. The surface preparation is important. If you've got all grime and old grease and what have you in the bottom bracket shell, you want to get rid of all that as much as possible. So a decent degreaser, microfiber rag or whatever, get in there. I mean, this is quite a new frame, so it's not too dirty anyway, but you know, if your bottom bracket's been in there a couple of years, chances are it's gonna be pretty grimy in there. You just wanna make those cup faces as clean as possible, ready to press in your new bottom bracket. Right, so we're gonna be fitting a SRAM dub system PressFit bottom bracket into this bike. Final point about surface preparation before we get on and press the cups in is just, this is a carbon frame. If you're using an aluminium frame or if you've got a titanium frame, I would say definitely, no doubt about it, you need some either anti-seize or a good quality grease on the cup faces before you install the bottom bracket. With carbon, the jury's out on that. There seems to be a very mixed opinion about whether you should or shouldn't grease carbon. Personally, I always like to use just the finest coat of a high quality grease, just a very, very light coat, just to help the bearings to seat. And again, also just, I don't like that dry surface contact because I believe that that can be potentially further down the line the cause of those nasty creaks that we talked about. So just the slightest little coat of grease then. So I'm literally just gonna get the tiniest amount on my finger. Now, most bottom brackets now have got written on them a right and a left on that central sleeve. So that makes it nice and easy for the fitment. I'm going to fit the right hand cup first. So I'm literally just going to wipe the lightest coat of grease around there. So with barely any on there, but just enough. That's going to help me, almost wiping it off again afterwards, but just a little coat on there just to help that PressFit system to slide into place. Right, I'm going to take my left hand cup off. Don't need that just yet. And then what I'm going to do is offer that up to the bottom bracket shell just by hand to begin with, okay? And really important, the most important thing in fact with any PressFit installation is going to be getting the bearings and the cups in as square as possible. So I would start just to push that in with my fingers. You'll be able to just locate it in place like that. So that's kind of step one really. Then we're going to start to look at the tool that you require to press it in the rest of the way. Okay, so tools for the job. Bit of a minefield with tools for pressing in a bottom bracket. There are all sorts of different styles on the market. Some of them can be quite expensive, I'll be honest. But it is worth using the proper tool. Don't be tempted to use a bit of wood and a hammer to whack your PressFit cups into your frame. Definitely not something you want to be doing at all. So yes, use the proper tool or a version of a tool like this to be able to control the way that you fit those bearings into the frame. I'm going to show you how that works right now. There's mixed opinions here as well about whether you should press both cups into the frame together or one at a time. My personal feelings is I like to just deal with one cup at a time so that I can maintain maximum control over making sure that cup is going into the frame squarely. And that's, I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. You don't want to that frame to be going in at a skewed angle because that could potentially damage the bottom bracket shell, and it will certainly make it much harder to fit as well. So before you crack on and press in, just another point is you might need, depending on the type of bottom bracket you're pressing in, an insert. to actually go in and to give you a surface to press against with the bottom bracket, so as not to damage the bearings. So never press directly on the bearing surface. I don't think that's going to do it any good. So luckily though, SRAM for the dub system give you this sacrificial part, which is to protect the bottom bracket as it's pressed into the frame. Right, so final checks then before I start to actually press the bearing into the frame. Got my insert on there just to protect the face of the bottom bracket, and then I'm going to just carefully insert the tool through the other end on until that begins to take up. There we go, right. Located the tool, and then I'm just going to carefully wind that in, being really conscious to keep everything as square and as neat as possible until I get to the point where the tool just starts to take up the slack, which is that point there. Now I would urge you just to take your time with this. Don't rush this part of the process. It's really important that that cup goes into the frame squarely. So just watching the whole time as you wind the pressure onto the tool, you'll be able to see that cup being drawn into the frame, and then just making certain that everything looks square. Stop, take a look, checking the gaps are pretty even. Yeah, it's looking great all the way around. So yeah, just watching that whole time, especially as you get towards the end, always checking that gap. Everything looks nice and even. As you feel that bearing cup seat against the frame, the important thing to do is not to go crazy and carry on pushing. Really, just once it's snugged up and you've got a good firm contact, that's all you need to do. You could potentially damage a bottom bracket shell by over tightening with the tool. You've got quite a lot of leverage on this style of tool. So yeah, just not in there nice and snug. Again, visual checks as well. Make sure you've got a nice even contact all the way around, and you know that's in nice and square and good to go. So I can wind the tool out. There you go. That side is all fitted. So for installing the cup on the opposite side of the frame, it's going to be exactly the same process. The only thing I would say just to watch out for is if your bottom bracket has a sleeve between the two cups, as this one does, as you install the left-hand cup, in this case, just make sure that you're lining that up correctly with the sleeve, and just start to press the bearing cup in just with our fingers to begin with. Okay, I'm going to put my cup protector back on this side, this side as well, and carefully feed that through the center of the bottom bracket. Locate that. So again, until we reach the point where the slack is now taken out, I can feel that's under tension, and I'm just going to watch as I start to pull the cup into the frame. Just be keeping a close eye, exactly like we did on the other side, that everything looks like it's going in nice and square in alignment, which it is. Just keep winding the tool in, checking the alignment. All looks good. Once you're happy that you've got everything all snugged up and good and tight, just back the tool out carefully so as not to damage any of the seals or parts of the internal sleeve. And there we have it. That is your PressFit bottom bracket installed into your frame. All that's left to do, of course, is reinstall your cranks, and again, just make sure that you get all the spacers for the bottom bracket or axle spacers in the correct orientation. And when you do the cranks up, don't forget to do them up to the specified torque. If you found this video useful, do give us a like and subscribe to the channel. It costs you absolutely nothing, and that will really help us to continue to deliver content for you in this way. And if it's more content that you're after, also head over to cyclist.co.uk for all the latest news, tech, some more how-tos, and also in-depth product and bike reviews. Thanks for watching.